I want to talk to former President Trump and his legal situation. Let's start at like 50 or 60,000 feet, right? From the outside looking in, okay, I look at the Alvin Bragg case in New York. Statute of limitations had expired. Normally a misdemeanor, they upgraded to a felony by combining like 18 different things, tying a bow on it, making new law. Okay. Then you go down to Georgia and Fannie Willis. You've got these two cases in this case in D.C. And then this other one in New York that's a civil case going after him. Not to mention the 14th Amendment efforts to remove him from the ballot in Colorado and Michigan or whatever. This from the outside, Mike Davis, looks very clearly like a concerted effort to go all in keeping him off the ballot, putting him in jail, preventing him from taking office. Just start at the top. And from a legal standpoint, tell me, is that is this a random coincidence that all these things are happening at once? Or do you believe that there is some kind of effort to ensure that Trump is imperiled politically, that he's locked up, that he could never take the office? I mean, what is going on? Because like I said, 50,000 feet looking down, if you brought somebody in, blindfolded them, didn't tell them the names of the people and said, what do you think is happening in this scenario? They would say, well, there's clearly an effort to keep this guy from, resuming any kind of normal political activity, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously Democrat lawfare and election interference against President Trump, because they know that the American people will put President Trump back in the White House on November 5th, 2024. The Democrats impeached President Trump twice for nonsense. They brought 4 indictments against President Trump for non-crimes. They're trying to bankrupt his business with a civil fraud lawsuit for the non-fraud of a businessman paying back sophisticated Wall Street banks in full, on time, as agreed, with interest. Somehow that's fraud. And then that all backfired. And, as we predicted at the Article 3 Project and our 2,500 plus media hits defending and supporting President Trump during this lawfare campaign by the Democrats going back to the Mar-a-Lago raid in August of 2022. And so Trump is now beating Biden like a drum for the upcoming election, right? And so what are the Democrats trying to do? They're just going to say, you know what, we're going to save democracy, apparently, by taking away the Americans' ability to pick their president. They're dusting off a post-Civil War constitutional provision, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, that was enacted after the Civil War to prevent Confederates who engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States from holding office, because they were, after the Civil War, these Confederates were winning office, including in the House of Representatives, and they were undermining the post-Civil War Reconstruction effort. They were undermining the Union, and so they passed Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And how this is supposed to work is, if you want to disqualify someone for insurrection or rebellion, you bring this is a case from 1869. Then Chief Justice Samuel Chase held that in order for Section 3 to be enforced, Congress has to pass a federal criminal statute for insurrection or rebellion. The U.S. attorney has to charge someone with insurrection or rebellion. You have to have a grand jury indict with probable cause. You need to have the person tried with evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. The jury has to find him guilty unanimously. The judge has to convict him, and that conviction has to be upheld on appeal under a specific federal criminal statute that Congress passed in 1870, right? And so that's on the books. They didn't. Jack Smith charged President Trump for January 6th. He didn't charge him for insurrection or rebellion because the evidence does not exist. What happened on January 6th was a protest.
And all of these people that were charged with violations on January 6th, has anybody been charged with the crime of insurrection?
No. There have been people who have been charged with like seditious conspiracy, but that's not the criminal statute that you can use to disqualify under Section 3 of the 14th.
Right, but I mean, you think about it, it's not just Trump that hasn't been charged, nevertheless convicted, but no one surrounding those events was charged with insurrection. So how do you say you, Trump, are unqualified to serve under this thing when not a single person was charged with it?
And that's just, think about what happened on January 6th. How many insurrectionists go unarmed into a nation's capital, right? I mean, it just doesn't happen. And how many insurrectionists get into a nation's capital and walk through velvet ropes, follow police direction, take selfies, and walk out without burning down the damn place? It was a protest that got out of control and turned into a riot, right? And so what these Democrats are trying to do is they're trying to go to deep blue states like Colorado. They went to a biased Democrat judge in Colorado, this new judge, Sarah Wallace, in the Denver District Court. She, right in 2022, after the Democrat governor named her to the Denver District Court, but before she was sworn in January, in October of 2022, she donated to an anti-Trump January 6th PAC to chase Republicans out of office for January 6th. And then when Trump's lawyers said, hey, you're biased, you can't sit on this case, she said, oh, yeah, I made that donation. I forgot about it, but don't worry about it. I can be fair, right? It's just complete nonsense.
Sure.
She held that there was an insurrection, which is just silly, but she said that she punted. She punted the political pressure and said, but the 14th Amendment doesn't apply to the president, which may or may not be right. But now the 7 Democrat appointees on
when
the
you
Colorado—
say or may or may not, why? Because here's the thing. I read that as a non-lawyer, and it mentions a bunch of officers of the United States, one of which is not named as the president.
Yeah, and that legal argument could be correct. But what this judge did was she set it up where she found at the trial that there was an insurrection, and then she made the legal conclusion that the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment doesn't apply to the president. She punted. She blinked at the last minute because of the political pressure, because of her donation. She's clearly biased. But what that does is it allows the 7 Democrat justices on the Colorado Supreme Court to say, okay, yeah, we're going to go with your finding there was an insurrection, but it does apply to the president, and we're going to kick him off the ballots. And then Trump's not going to win Colorado. It's a deep blue state now after Democrats legalized weed and went to all-mail ballots, and then all the hippies moved there and ruined the state like COVID. But they're going to use that precedent in Colorado, right, in swing states like Michigan, like New Hampshire. This is not over. The Democrats, they fear President Trump, and so they will do anything they can to stop him, including bankrupting him, throwing him in prison for the rest of his life, or coming up with bogus legal theories that just take him off the ballot. The people
right,
who are screaming democracy are the biggest fascist in America.
Okay, so there's the ballot, right? And we just talked about that. These are these states that are Colorado, Michigan, et cetera, that are trying to get him kicked off the ballot. So far unsuccessful, but as you point out, in Colorado, you've got 7 judges, the Colorado Supreme Court, that's the next legal battle. But let's go to his actual legal troubles, right? So you've got Jack Smith, the special counsel prosecuting this case in D.C. 2 things happened this week that I thought, or in the last 7 days, I can't remember when the week started because it's been crazy. The first that I thought was interesting, and I don't fully appreciate it because, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I read enough that I'm trying to figure out if I'm getting this right, is he asked the Supreme Court for an expedited review of whether Trump was immune from prosecution. And initially I thought this is interesting, but what I have garnered is that part of the reason he did that is that it is his hope that they rule in his favor, Jack Smith. He then cuts out the appeals process because the Supreme Court has ruled. And therefore, if he wins his case, Trump could be put in jail earlier. Is that really what's happening here? Or is there some legal maneuvering that I'm just not aware of? But bottom line is, Jack Smith basically is trying to take one of Trump's arguments away and saying, hey, Supreme Court, rule on this right away, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what he's trying to do. Jack Smith is desperate to keep this March 4th trial date. This Biden special counsel, Jack Smith, who is a deranged partisan who has been unanimously reversed by the Supreme Court in the past, 8-0. It would have been 9-0, but Justice Scalia died when he tried to take out Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell. He did take him out politically. The conviction was overturned. Bob McDonnell was a likely presidential or vice presidential candidate in 2016. Jack Smith took him out with a bogus legal theory. Jack Smith's doing the same thing, or trying to do the same thing now with Trump. What Jack Smith's trying to do, he knows that presidential immunity needs to be decided. You cannot criminally or civilly charge government officials for acting within their official capacity or, under Supreme Court case law, the outer perimeter of their official duties, right? And how can the only one who can order a—
So wait, so what is that? Just stop, because I thought that President Trump was saying, hey, I still have this power as a former president. But what you're saying is that there is question about whether or not somebody who was a government official can be prosecuted for their government official role so meaning Trump is immune from activity while he was president. Is that what I'm trying to?
Yes. So let's put it this way. On January 6th, when President Trump was trying to enforce the Electoral Count Act of 1887, when he ordered his vice president to not certify the election, he can't do that as a private citizen. He can only do that as a president of the United States. And so the question is he immune from doing that? Is he immune from telling? First of all, step back. What happened on January 6th was not a crime. It's not what Trump did on January 6th was not a crime. It is not a crime to object to a presidential election. It is allowed.
There'd be a lot of Democrats in jail if it was.
It's allowed by the First Amendment. Democrats objected in 1968, 2000, 2004, and 2016. Al Gore, John Kerry, and Hillary Clinton are not in prison for objecting. So why should President Trump be in prison for objecting to a presidential election? It's also not only allowed by the Electoral Count Act of 1887, it's allowed by the First Amendment. You can object to elections in America. It's only illegal to object to elections in third world Marxist hellholes and now in DC and Atlanta, right? So step back and look at it that way. But then look at the separate issue. Either Trump did this in his personal capacity and the First Amendment protects him and the Electoral Count Act of 1887 protects him, or he did this on what he did on January 6th was in his presidential capacity, right? And so then if it's in his presidential capacity, presidential immunity applies, right? They've never decided this issue in the criminal context as it relates to the president because a former president has never been charged criminally because Jack Smith brought this unprecedented indictment. But if you look at the speech or debate clause for Congress or judicial immunity, it applies to both the civil context and the criminal context. So why the hell wouldn't the president be immune from criminal prosecution?